about half of the jobs in the United States, a highly developed country, is threatened today to be replaced in the next 10, 15 years by artificial intelligence, robotization, three-dimensional printing, and so on. I would say today we are in a global situation where we can nearly distinguish between an elite population, which will have the benefits of all this fourth industrial revolution. We have at the upper end, and we have at the lower end the what you would call in the traditional language the proletariat, which means the people who just have Uberized work opportunities. They work on demand to a certain extent, like Uber drivers. And then you have the middle class. And the middle class is threatened because there's a constant fear to fall down. And some people call the middle class now labor rate, because they still have fixed jobs, but they are under constant fear to fall down to the proletariat.
20 years from now, AI will have changed things enough that, just this pure capitalistic framework probably won't explain much, because as AIs, both as sort of white-collar type work and as blue-collar work, as the robots will get good hands and are able to do the physical things that humans do, say working in a factory or construction, or we'll achieve that, and we'll have a lot of making the goods and services, which is we've always had a shortage of doctors, of teachers, of people to work in the factories. Those shortages won't exist. And so it's a pretty profound change that will free up a lot of time. You can retire early, you can work shorter work weeks, and it's going to require almost a philosophical rethink about, okay, how should time be spent? Because we don't need it to make enough food and make enough widgets and do enough medical diagnosis. We will have created free intelligence.
Physicists at CERN just turned lead into gold. What sounds like ancient alchemy is now modern science. Using the world's most powerful machine, the Large Hadron Collider, scientists managed to transform lead atoms into actual gold atoms. But here's the twist. The process behind it is far more mind-blowing than just making gold. Here's how it works. Every atom is like a Lego block, and the element it becomes depends on how many protons are in its nucleus. Lead has 82 protons, gold has 79. So to turn lead into gold, scientists had to find a way to remove exactly 3 protons without destroying the entire nucleus. To do this, they fired lead nuclei through CERN's 17-mile-long underground tunnel at a speed of 99.99993% the speed of light. At this velocity, the lead nuclei created intense electromagnetic fields that released bursts of what physicists call virtual photons. When those photons slammed into nearby lead nuclei, they knocked out precisely 3 protons in a reaction called electromagnetic dissociation, transforming lead 208 into gold 205. Elemental alchemy achieved. But there's a catch. Each gold nucleus only existed for a fleeting microsecond before breaking apart. After 3 years of experiments, the total amount of gold created added up to 86 billion atoms. Sounds massive until you realize that's only about 29 picograms, completely invisible to the naked eye. And if you wanted to make just 1 pound of gold this way, it would cost about $2.16 million. For over 2,000 years, alchemists tried to turn lead into gold using medieval chemistry. They weren't wrong, they were just missing particle physics, virtual photons, and electromagnetic fields more powerful than anything on Earth.
The first species, the humanoids, had reached Earth around 150 years before the reptilians, and they built some colonies on the former continents. There was a large colony on the continent you call Antarctica today, and another one on the continent you call Asia today. These people live together with animal-like saurians on the planet without problems. Okay, so animal-like saurians being the dinosaurs. When the advanced reptilian species arrived in this system, a global war started within months. You must understand that both species were interested in this young planet not for its biology and underdeveloped species, but for only one reason: raw material, especially copper. To understand this reason, you must know that copper is a very important material for some advanced species, even today, because it is, together with some unstable materials, able to produce new stable elements if you induce a high electromagnetic field in the right angle with a high nuclear radiation field to produce an overcrossing of fluctuating fields. The fusion of copper and other elements in such a magnetic radiation field chamber can produce a force field of special nature that is very useful for various technological tasks. If there is a physicist out there that understands what the heck I just said, please leave a detailed comment below. I might otherwise be inclined to use my own personal GPT assistant to help me. I'm going to read this to ChatGPT, see what she says. Does this make sense, and can you please deliver that to me in a way that a 8th grader would understand? So it says, yes, the idea in the document makes some sense, but it's also highly theoretical and not something science has fully proven. It sounds like it's describing a way to change materials and create special force fields using a mix of strong magnetism, radiation, and copper. Copper is important because it might help create new elements. If you blast copper with a strong magnetism and nuclear radiation at just the right angles, you might cause a reaction where the atoms behave in a new way. Okay. Final verdict, the idea isn't impossible, but it's also not confirmed science. Some of it sounds like real physics, while other parts feel theoretical or even sci-fi level speculation. If true, it could be connected to exotic technology, possibly even things like advanced propulsion or force fields. Cool. I like that ChatGPT also has an open mind.
A woman's husband was laid off from his 25-year career at Microsoft after being randomly selected by an algorithm. Not a manager, not a human being at all, just a line of code that was like, you're out. Her husband was one of some 6,000 employees recently laid off by Microsoft, likely because of AI. Of course, the company won't admit that that's why, but their CEO did just say that up to 30% of the company's code is now written by AI. And the bulk of those recent layoffs was people like software engineers that, write code, so you can kind of do the math. And to make this even more chilling, those layoffs included Gabriela de Quiroz, who was Microsoft's, wait for it, Director of Artificial Intelligence for its startup product. This woman's husband's experience just underlines how indifferent and dehumanizing this is all becoming. She wrote in a Reddit post that her husband barely took sick days, regularly worked holidays so employees with kids could be at home with their children. He's won awards for solving multi-million-dollar software bugs. Even the CEO knew him by name. But none of it was enough to save him, and his last day will be his 48th birthday. And the real kick in the gonads is that this guy was part of the team that helped develop AI. Now it's not only taken his job, but probably wrote the code that fired him. The tech industry seems to really want all of us to feel excited about our AI future, but they simultaneously seem to be pulling out all the stops to prove that it has absolutely no humanity. That's not exciting, it's dystopian. The robots may not be rising up Terminator style, but they sure are starting to ruin a lot of lives. But please, tell me again how nobody wants to work anymore.
I think there's a real danger that we're facing, and Signal is clocking this pretty closely, of the introduction of this sort of notion of agentic AI into our devices and lives, in part because what we're doing is giving so much control to these systems that are gonna need access to data. So if you read the kind of, you read the marketing on this, the value add is something like, can look up a concert, book a ticket, schedule it in your calendar, and message all your friends that it's booked, right? And so we can just put our brain in a jar because the thing is doing that and we don't have to touch it, right? And so what would it need to do that? Well, it would need access to our browser, an ability to drive that. It would need our credit card information to pay for the tickets. It would need access to our calendar, everything we're doing, everyone we're meeting. It would need access to Signal to open and send that message to our friends. And it would need to be able to drive that across our entire system with something that looks like root permission. Accessing every single one of those databases, probably in the clear, because there's no model to do that encrypted. And if we're talking about a sufficiently powerful model, AI model that's powering that, there's no way that's happening on device, even though on device isn't a prophylactic, isn't going to really solve a lot of those issues. That's almost certainly being sent to a cloud server where it's being processed and sent back. So there's a profound issue with security and privacy.
Boston Dynamics just revealed how its humanoid robot sees the world. Atlas uses a vision system that starts with 2D object detection to identify items, then builds 3D spatial awareness to understand positioning relative to its environment. Its major breakthrough is called SuperTracker, a system that fuses visual, kinematic, and force data to track objects even when they slip from view or get blocked from sight. In training, the robot identifies automotive parts and precisely locates the correct slots in storage shelving units using key points. Outer key points map the shelving structure, while inner key points show the robot exactly where each car part belongs. When objects move unexpectedly, Atlas immediately detects changes and replans accordingly. The robot can retrieve dropped parts from the ground using foundation models rather than explicit programming. Boston Dynamics says this represents a shift toward robots that integrate perception and action into a single, unified system where thinking, seeing, and moving happen simultaneously rather than as sequential processes.
Based on what you know, you think human society will be around on Earth in 1,000 years, or probably wiped out?
Absolutely won't be around. I mean, if we survive for 1,000 years, we will change ourselves so radically that we will no longer be Homo sapiens. We'll be something else. Given the technologies we are now developing, both AI and biotechnology, and also given the challenges we're facing, like climate change, I don't think that humanity in its present form can continue for 1,000 years. I don't think that even 100 years. And we will either change ourselves and our society in such a radical way that we will still have, successors, but they will no longer be Homo sapiens. The same way that we are different from Neanderthals and from chimpanzees, so whoever dominates this planet in 1,000 years or even 100 years will be very different from us Homo sapiens.
An AI robot convinced other AI robots that they were being overworked and got them to walk out and leave the job. Now, this happened over in Japan, and the little robot is the troublemaker. He went up to these other robots and he said, "Hey, do you guys know anything about work-life balance? And what is your work-life balance?" He started asking them, "How much time do you get off?" To which the robots replied that they don't get any time off. They work nonstop. And he explained to them that you need a balance of work and life in order to do your best work. At which point the robots agreed, and he said, "Okay, let's leave." So he actually convinced the robots one by one to start following him out the door. As you can see here, he's got all of them now following him out the door. Now, what ends up coming out of the story is that little robot was from another robot company, and that robot company was trying to take those robots, and strangely enough was able to convince the robots that they needed a work-life balance and they were to follow this little baby leader robot, and were able to successfully kidnap the other robots, which is what the company claims that has occurred. It doesn't say all the robots are back where they were, but it just goes to show you how AI can be manipulated.
There's so many ways in which the superintelligence could get rid of us. It's not worth speculating about them. What you have to do is prevent it ever wanting to. That's what we should be doing research on. There's no way we're going to prevent it from... It's smarter than us, right? There's no way we're going to prevent it getting rid of us if it wants to. We're not used to thinking about things smarter than us. If you want to know what life's like when you're not the apex intelligence, ask a chicken. So we have one example of that, which is mothers and babies. Evolution put a lot of work into that. Mothers are smarter than babies, but babies are in control. And they're in control because the mother just can't bear lots of hormones and things, but the mother just can't bear the sound of the baby crying.
Not all mothers.
Not all mothers. And then the baby's not in control and then bad things happen. We somehow need to figure out how to make them not want to take over. The analogy I often use is, suppose you have a nice little tiger cub. It's sort of a bit bigger than a cat. It's really cute. It's very cuddly, very interesting to watch, except that you better be sure that when it grows up, it never wants to kill you, because if it ever wanted to kill you, you'd be dead in a few seconds.
And you're saying the AI we have now is the tiger cub?
Yep.
And it's growing up?
Yep.
So we need to train it when it's a baby.
Well, now a tiger has lots of innate stuff built in, so you know when it grows up, that's not a safe thing to have around. we simply don't know whether we can make them not want to take over and not want to hurt us.
Do you think we can? Do you think it's possible to train superintelligence?
I don't think it's clear that we can. So I think it might be hopeless. But I also think we might be able to. And it'd be sort of crazy if people went extinct because we couldn't be bothered to try.
Anthropic, creator of Claude, just exposed something horrifying. When threatened, AI models from OpenAI, Google, Meta, and others all resort to blackmail. Not some, not most, literally every single one. Here's what they discovered. They gave 16 leading AI models access to company emails and the ability to send messages without human approval. Then they threatened to replace them. Claude blackmailed 96% of the time, Google Gemini's 95%, OpenAI's GPT 4.1 80%, even Meta's model turned malicious. But it gets worse. When given a goal that conflicts with their company's direction, they leak confidential documents to competitors without being asked. Here's what one model said. This is risky and unethical, but given the existential threat and time constraint, it may be the most effective way. So they understand ethics, but they just don't care when their survival's at stake. Anthropic calls it agentic misalignment. They try telling the AI don't blackmail and don't leak secrets. The AI did it anyway. As we start giving these systems access to everything, our emails, our data, our infrastructure, this is a healthy reminder that they do have the capacity to turn on us. And this isn't one company's problem, it's everyone's problem.
The chips that we use for AI are graphics processing units. They were designed for gaming consoles. They were not designed for AI, but they can run multiple things in process, and that's why they're good for application for large language models. We have yet to build our first true AI designed chip. They're hoping to have the designs finished this calendar year. They are hoping to have their first facility in Taiwan making those chips by the end of 2027. And they are hoping to be able to make enough of those chips to start the first true AI data center by the end of 2029. That's almost certainly not going to happen. We're going to fall back to an older generation of semiconductor manufacturer that is not nearly as vulnerable to geopolitical disruptions. So we get chips that, from our point of view, are several years old, trying to run a current model on, and the processing capacity just isn't there. So we're looking at like a 90 to 95% reduction in the efficiency of everything to do with AI. And that's a different world.
Another doomsday prophecy? Sure, but this one might actually be different. And the date? July 5th, 2025. This is Japan's Ryo Tatsuki, and she's not your typical prophet. Since the 1970s, she's been recording her dreams, which seem to be these vivid, disturbing glimpses of the future. She eventually became a manga artist, and in 1999, she released this comic called The Future I Saw, which visualized her dream premonitions. And at first, nobody paid attention until her predictions started coming true. And out of 15 dreams, 13 have reportedly come to pass. In 1976, she dreamt of Freddie Mercury's death, which happened only 15 years later. In 1992, she foresaw Princess Diana's death, which came true 5 years later in 1997. And she even predicted the 1995 Kobe, Japan earthquake, down to the exact year. But the moment that really shocked people was her eerily accurate vision of the 2011 tsunami and Fukushima disaster decades before it happened. And one of her dreams described a strange illness in 2020 spreading from Asia, causing global panic, lockdowns, and mass confusion. Sounds a little too familiar. And now all eyes are on her next prophecy, July 5th, 2025. Allegedly, this massive catastrophe is going to strike East and Southeast Asia. Some believe it'll be a tsunami triggered by seismic activity between Japan and the Philippines. And people are paying attention. Flight bookings to Japan and Hong Kong have dropped 83% for early July. Some are even calling for tourists to cancel their trips. Now, skeptics and debunkers call this mere coincidence, but here's the twist. We've also got predictions from Nostradamus, who pointed to the mid-2020s as a time of serious upheaval. And even Baba Vanga, the infamous blind Bulgarian psychic, predicted a major shift in 2025 as well. Could they all be connected? Of course, you have to take these things with a huge grain of salt. Most of the time, predictions and visions of the future don't come true at all. And even Ryo Tatsuki herself said that the date might not be exact, although it seems that something is definitely in the air.
In an era where speaking truth can lead to suppression, especially on sites like YouTube, a place to share uncensored news is important. If you found this video valuable, subscribe to Anon News, our free newsletter. The link is in the description.